Hi, everybody. I am your friendly neighborhood techno wizard. Sorry I've been gone. I've been printing like a madman, working my butt off. Yeah, this is going to be about, as the title would suggest, how a bullet works and how we got to a bullet. I want to do this for my YouTube channel, and like always, I've said, I am a gun guy, but I'm also a gamer and a video gamer and a RPG gamer and a 3D printer. I've always felt that you should always, as a gamer, know how guns work. I think everybody should know how guns work. I think you comply with the gun safety rules, and I'm going to go over those real quickly. First, never point a gun at anything you don't want to harm or destroy or kill. That's a bad idea. Second, and this is probably more important, treat every gun as if it's loaded. I.e., I don't care if your best friend handed you the gun so there ain't a bullet in it. You may have been having a bad day. He may have farted his brains out. You check. The gun is unsafe until you check it. You keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. I have to teach people that. I actually took a friend out recently and I said, okay, no. Don't put your finger in the trigger because that's how you accidentally shoot yourself or your buddy. Finger's going to trigger. The fourth and final kind of rule is know what's behind your target. Yes, you've got the bad guy in front of you. Yes, he's a bad guy. Knife, crazy person. Okay, unfortunately, 10 feet behind him is a bunch of kids who are startled and just staring, and there's a crowd of them. If you miss him, or if your bullets go through him, they will hit those kids. Those are the rules. Always treat a gun as if it's loaded. Never have your finger in the trigger until you're ready to fire. Only point your gun at something you want to destroy or kill. And be aware of what's behind your target. Some idiot, like, I was out in the woods one time, and all of a sudden, bullet rings. I'm like, what the hell? And I go, what? I scream. Oh, sorry, I'm just testing out my rifle. Guy had literally just taken his rifle, put a target on a tree, and was shooting into the woods. Yeah, the woods me and my buddies played in as a kid. Now, after that tangent, and hopefully you pay attention to those rules, I'm going to go off on how a bullet works. I'll put it that way. And I'm going to go over the history, and then I'm going to tell you how modern bullets work and give you some terminology. And it's not a clip, it's a magazine. Clips are used on several weapons, and they don't stay with the gun. Alright, but let's do this real quick. Here we go. This is a modern bullet. And yeah, I don't know what caliber this is. Oh, 50 cal round. Big ass. Oh, by the way, cal is percentage of an inch. So if it says 50, the bullet is, 50% of an inch. 45% of an inch. Across the bullet, i.e., big. Alright, now that being said, or that being shown to you, I'm going to go over the history. We started off with things called hand cannons. Hand cannons are literally what they're described as. No, they're not really cool revolvers like the, Smith & Wesson 500 or 460. Those are considered modern hand cannons because they're giant caliber guns that you supposedly are supposed to hold with your hands. Yeah, I'm not going to go 45 for a reason, but I'll say this. The old hand cannons were literally that. They were used in China and other places. They had varying versions of this. It's essentially a metal tube with one end plugged up, a little hole to get in so you can light it off. It's a powder charge and a bullet in front of it. They didn't have wadding, they didn't have anything like that. This was just the bare basic getting the concept working. And there were usually three guys. One guy who held it, one guy who lit it, and one guy who knew how to load the damn thing. The guy who knew to load the damn thing didn't stick around for the lighting or the holding of it. They would literally stick a fuse in it. So it was the idea, the concept was one guy would hold, they would load it, the guy would stick the fuse in, and the guy who knew all that sort of stuff would leave while the other guy lit it, and he would start to walk away. And then the guy holding it would wait till it went off and hold it. If there's an accident, you know who's kind of going to get it. The guy holding it was usually the low guy in the totem pole because totem pole's reversed, but low guy in the totem pole, essentially at that point for the expression we'll use, got blown up. I mean, if the bullets were not like modern manufacturing, I buy a 45 caliber bullet from Gus's manufacturer, and I buy a 45 caliber bullet from Jack's manufacturing. Okay, Jack's bullets and Gus's bullets, or Bob's bullets. I'm pretty sure the .45 caliber is relatively, without like minor detail, like minute details, same damn bullet. Back then it wasn't. So like I said, bullets would jam in the barrel. And your gun just went from a cannon to a bomb. Blow up in your face. Because most likely the weak point in the metal was the hole you stuck the fuse in. Now, you can see how they size these up in every World War II movie or every, Civil War movie. Yep, fire! And the cannons are all lit, and it's been that way, basically just size this thing up. They also used to make them, Bell manufacturers learned how to make them. They're made of bronze, because bronze would absorb the hit. Iron cannons were later. Alright, so that being said, that gets up to about the Civil War, just before, Revolutionary War. Revolutionary War we started having, before then, we had things called flintlocks, and matchlocks, and wheel locks. I think the matchlock came first. It's essentially more like the modern black powder rifles we have. It is a long tube, hole cut in the side, there's a little pan off to the side. You would take the charge, and the way you loaded it in would be the powder, or your charge, a piece of wadding, which is usually fabric or your underwear you didn't want to wear anymore or something like that, and then the bullet. Again, bullets were not, the gun barrel and the bullet might not be exactly from the right dimensions, because you got your gun in Kentucky, or you got your gun in England, and you got your bullet mold in France. Okay, you said the same caliber to both guys. Unfortunately, the French guys' measurements were slightly off. They were a little smaller, or whatever. Their measurements were off. So you put the piece of wadding in there because when the charge gets set off, the wadding essentially fills in all the gaps and helps push the bullet out. It creates an airtight or a gas seal to push the bullet out. And that's the point of it, pushing the bullet out. All right? Now, the way you set off the charge, that's where the match, wheel, and flintlock come in. Matchlock was literally a burning match. It was like a long cord that just burned slowly. And the bullets weren't really it wasn't like a smack like most bullets we get. You have the hammer fall and bang, goes off. Well, with the matchlock, it was essentially like a lever. You'd hold the rifle, you kind of squeeze, and that little pan on the side, you put a small charge in, like a small little bit of gunpowder, and the main charge went in there. And when it's over the barrel, there's a small hole from that little pan, and you had to sometimes you had to cover or didn't. Actually, most matchlocks didn't have this kind of cover. However, there's a little hole in there, and you would have the match, which is burning the whole time, and it would go into the powder, set the powder off. The powder would explode in your face, and it would shoot a jet of flame over through that little hole in the side of the barrel. That would then set up the main charge, and then that would, of course, then shoot the bullet out the front. Wadding does it all up. Sounds simple unless there's like a breeze and it blows the powder out of the matchlock. Then came your wheel locks. I think wheel locks and flint locks came around at the same time, but wheel lock was basically made by clockmakers. What you would do is literally wind it up like a clock, and it was a abrasive wheel with a piece of flint held against it. And what you would do is you would load your gun, put the flash in there, and I forget whether some of these had pan covers, like you would put the powder in there, and it was, don't forget, this is the time when they, every clockmaker and bell maker could make a gun. It wasn't like going to, I'd like a Remington. It was like going to, I would like Francois rifle. I heard from my friends they are very good. Don't always work out that way. But they were individually made. No mass manufacturing, no set parameters. You could order a bigger barrel or a bigger bullet if you wanted to. That being said, the wheel would turn, rub against the flint, right? Because you twist it up like a clock, and then the spring released, all that force against it. It would shoot sparks off the flint, into the pan, setting off the charge, in through the hole, setting off the main charge, and shooting the bullet out. A little bit more reliable. Yeah, a lot of expensive parts. Not easy to fix. You had to have a clockmaker literally to fix it. And clockmakers were, hey, I can charge a lot for my services. I do that too. Note to self, if you want to make money, get skill, then charge for that skill. Welcome to capitalism, you're awesome. But then you went to the flintlock. The flintlock was literally, you had the pan, and you had a piece of flint in a little vise. You would click, and it would go, tink. Well, there was a pan cover over the little powder spoon, or little powder, charge area. And it would hold that there, so it was much more reliable in the wind and everything else. You'd much more rely on it. You would hit it, it would strike that thing, causing the pan cover to fly off. But when it did, it would take it and it would scrape against it and shoot sparks in. And they're setting that mini charge off through the little hole, setting the main charge off, firing the bullet, the wad, and everything out the front of the barrel. This was infinitely better, but when you click, there would be a delayed reaction. I'll put it that way. There would be a sort of, you would go click. Click, boom. The time in between those is what gave your position away, gave where you are away, all that kind of stuff, and it was noisy. There was a Scottish pastor, preacher, who had, how do I phrase this? He was hunting bird, and he hated it, because every time you hit that, like I said, the delayed reaction, the bird would hear the flash in the pan go off and run. Don't forget, bullets aren't accurate at this point. They're not, it's not like today when you can nail drive at 1,000 yards with certain rifles. But the bird would run off, and he's like, this sucks. So he developed the percussion cap. The percussion cap is just like it sounds. Once percussed, or having physical force placed upon it, it sparked off. So what they did was they replaced that pan and the flint and the wheel lock mechanism, all that kind of stuff got replaced with another hammer, which is where you have the, hammer on a gun, verbatim, it would literally be a port on the gun, you cock it back, you put your percussion cap on there. Same way you load the standard, black powder these days. You put the powder in, your wad in, and your bullet in. And then you put the percussion cap on there, so you didn't have to have powder out in the wind. You didn't have to powder. You didn't have powder horn for the gun, but not for like the flash in the pan. Never happened. By the way, the flash in the pan, that's when a gun wouldn't go off. Like everyone says, "Oh man, that's a flash in the pan." Really showy, nothing really happened. That's because you pull light on the flint because oh no, the last charge you put in got wet and you have to prick the hole open and make sure it works again, which really sucked because you're now fixing a gun that's loaded. But that's where flash in the pan comes from. But this fixed that problem because percussion caps were much more reliable. They were much better. They would shoot sparks down a little tube into the barrel. That was really good. Worked through the Civil War. You would have guys load them. 3 shots a minute was considered good. And they weren't really aiming because they did volley fire, which was insanely stupid Napoleonic warfare crap. And they would then, do that. Well, towards the end of that, we get like revolvers with percussion caps. You have to load it like the Colt revolver. I've got one. I've actually got a black powder musket up there with it's a 50 cal. But you can own a 50 cal black powder. We then go up, and at this point, the Civil War, the biggest change was what they call the paper patch bullet. This is sort of more getting to, let me do this, 2-shot idea. It's more getting towards this kind of a concept. But it wasn't there yet. What they did was they basically took your powder and your bullet and they wrapped paper around it and kind of, twisted both ends like a piece of candy. The little paper was wax paper. What you would do is you would be on the battlefield, you would have a sort of pouch in your side that had like 10 holes in it or 10 little tubes that you could stick each one of these paper patch bullets in. You would pull one out, you would take it with your teeth, tear off the end. You would go up to the end of the barrel like a standard, load it. Then you would take the paper and the bullet and push it down in. You would then ram it down, and you could then raise your gun, ready your gun, put the percussion cap on it, and fire. The wadding that was usually loaded in on its own was now loaded in with the bullet because it was part of the bullet. The paper patch essentially around it, or the paper patch bullet would just make the wadding work. And also a little more standardized. You could make them beforehand instead of like loading with paper. You could have like 10 of these, like I said, 10 of these ready to go. Made firing much easier, much faster, much easier reloads. Okay. We then get to doing that. Time marches on. They develop the revolver. The revolver uses percussion caps. The rifles percussion caps. Eventually, somebody decides to put it in a bullet. Makes a sort of more modern bullet, like this one. They take all that technology of the percussion cap, the bullet itself, and the charge, and they put it in a copper jacket or brass jacket copper. Alright, but how do I phrase it? Where is it? Yeah, here you go. Here's a really good example of what I mean. This is how modern bullet works and how bullets work in general. Percussion cap, primer as it's now called, powder charge, bullet case. So in other words, they took all the instrumentation before, they packed it into this so you don't need to load it. This also leads to much faster reloading. Like, think about it. You instead of like reloading and taking 3 shots a minute, now I can get as many rounds off as I can shove into the gun. Revolvers, it's like, you know, when the guy would fan the revolver. You know, okay, yeah, well, great. But you can reload much, much faster. You can reload much, much more efficiently. These were also produced in a industrial type capacity to a relative degree. You still had Bob's ammo shop and you had Jack's ammo shop, but Bob and Jack were usually in 2 different cities. And things came in weird calibers. Actually, there's one funny bullet they don't have here called a prick bullet or a... Oh, it's just really weird. It was like this, like, you see this rimfire right here, right? The rimfire is that the percussion, the primer is not like a separate piece, not like placed into the bullet. It's literally just the bottom of the bullet has a big ring around it. It was rimfire. The hammer or the little, like whenever you're looking into the bullet, there's an impact mark. That's where the nail or the I'm gonna say pokey thingy sits, but I know there's the striker pin hits. Well, in this one, when a rimfire hits the rim, it sets off this rim, and then it sets off the charge. But I forget what they called them. They're like they had this weird thing where they had the bullet that looked like a rimfire, except for this one little piece that came up that was literally designed to fit out the gun. You would load it into like a revolver, and it would be sticking up, and the hammer would actually hit it, and then that would set off the charge, and it would fire the bullet. Really neat idea. I think it was used in France or something like that, but the problem with that was, with those little flags on it, you'd reach into your pocket to grab 1 or 2, like you're in a tense situation, and you'd pull your hand out, and all the bullets, you know, would catch onto your glove and your hand and your skin and fall all over the place. Really didn't take over real well, didn't work real well. The smoothness of the bullet makes it much less easier. And at this point, you have all of this combined into one. Let me see if I can find something over here. There's a little bit better one. There's the primer. The guy put it all into one bullet, all into one container that's now weatherproof. Don't forget, back then and even now, if you're flying by powder, you need to worry, is it raining? Because if it's raining, your powder gets wet, it ain't working. I bet your bullets get wet, they get in the mud. You can literally drop shell casings or bullets into the mud and pick them up, wipe them off, throw them in a gun, and they still work because everything's encapsulated. Alright, now, see, this is how it works in a gun. Bullets go up, but this is a modern firearm. Black powder was much different. Alright, so I've gone over all the bullet stuff. Alright, now this is modern bullet. This is what they advanced to. Copper jacket replaces that. You have the primer, which is 99 to 10. You pull it, and at this point, don't forget, now when you've got bullets being manufactured, they're being manufactured in an industrial capacity. So the tolerances and the settings are all set, and they're stamped out millions at a time. I'm now going to go into how the bullet firing works, just to let you know. See? There's your firing pin. Firing pin! You pull the trigger, this spring, you pull back, stores up energy. releases energy, strikes the primer. That primer then sets the target in a little tube, struts this off, and then throws it forward, pushing compression. That, by the way, note about gunpowder. People have to understand this is you are dealing with something that burns up in milliseconds. However, when you have a rifle round and you have a pistol round, the pistol round usually has finer grains, and the rifle round usually has bigger grains. The reason for this is bigger grains take longer to burn up, longer to expand, i.e. going down a rifle, it gives the gas longer to burn up and it gives it longer time on the push. When you have a pistol, you've got a short barrel, so you have to get the maximum amount of power out of that you can in the minimum amount of time, because there's not much time traveling down a 4-inch barrel or a 5-inch barrel. There is a lot of time traveling down a 16-inch or 21-inch barrel. And that's, by the way, there's differences in that, and I'll get into a little bit of that later. But this is just basic mechanics. Firing the bullet down there, bullet expands, goes off. All manufactured, right? Alright, so what I want to get into now is... oh, shotgun. I really want to go over shotgun. Do I have a better shotgun bullet? No. No. I'll have to do this one. Alright, so right here with the shotgun. A shotgun requires a lot less force to fire a bullet. Charge is usually smaller. However, a shotgun usually is made of plastic, or a good section of it is, because they don't need to because of the powder. Powder's a lot less charge. Flings shot. There's 100, double O, triple O, bird shot, 9, 1 shot size, slug, sabot slugs, all that kind of weird stuff that comes out of a shotgun, which I love. And Mossberg, 590, great for home defense. Shockwave's even better. But that's what comes out of a shotgun. And by the way, spread in a shotgun is determined by the distance. I hate it in movies when some guy fires a shotgun at 4 feet and it's like cuts the guy in half. It's like, no, it's still a solid slug at that point, essentially in the air. You just blast a really big hole. Alright, so that's how a bullet works. Propels it out the barrel. Now, there's different kinds of bullets. The amount of charge you put in here and the kind of powder, like I was talking about before, determines certain things. When we had the great hunters going down to Africa to shoot rhino and elephant and lions and tigers and bears, oh my, the problem was that they were taking their rifles from England and France that were really good at shooting deer. A rhino is a assault unicorn. It is going to run you over. An elephant the same way. If you want to shoot an elephant, the standard rifle that's going to kill a deer will just make an elephant really pissed off. Or a rhino really pissed off. Even a tiger at a certain point, because of the mass of the thing and the fierceness of the thing, it'll just come at you. So, what they did was they developed Magnum rounds. Now, I'm going to go down this little trail here just to get this out of the way. Magnum rounds, the term Magnum, actually comes from Magnum wine, because apparently a lot of these guys down there were drinking it while they came up with this idea. The idea is that they pour more gunpowder into the charge, thus making the bullet come out faster, thus giving the bullet more penetration power into the rhino or the deer or whatever, just more penetration, right? Because you're trying to hit the things hard and kill it. Hopefully trying to do that. The problem was they, like I said, they had bullets built for a certain caliber rifle that had been built and designed for a certain amount of charge. This would lead to, the problem is if you do this and you do it wrong, the gun blows up on you. If you have too much of a charge and you pull the trigger, okay, the gun just went from a gun to a hand grenade, or because the barrel and the chamber were not designed for the pressures that are caused by more gunpowder, you get that, mushrooming end, because it would literally be the force would be ripping that end apart, and the force attacks the weakest thing, and most gun barrels were kind of, done this weird kind of welding together, and they would just start to separate the end of the barrel. That's where that classic image comes from. But this is also modern guns. You have to watch out for this. I have something called the Schofield. Great revolver, fun to shoot. It's a 44-40 cowboy round. Cowboy round because it doesn't use that much gunpowder. It uses enough gunpowder to harm, damage, and be an effective weapon, but it doesn't have a 44 Magnum's force. If I take my 44-40 rounds, stick them in a 44 Magnum, nothing's really going to happen. gun's designed for higher pressures. And what I mean the pressure is like when that goes off, the shell casing, everything, bullet going down the barrel, the whole area is stressed by the explosion gases. That's what pushes the barrel out the thing first. However, if I take a 44 Magnum round, stick it in my Schofield 4440, I will be needing my wife to open up my mayonnaise jars for the rest of my life because I will be called Stumpy, luckily, if I'm lucky, because it will blow my hand off. The gun will explode because you're setting off too much of a charge. The gun is not designed, the metal is not designed, the element is not designed to contain that amount of pressure. You know, and the Great White Hunters found this out when the gun, they'd pull the trigger and it would blow up and Bob lost his head. This happened also in Vietnam with jamming Jenny, the first incarnation of the AR-15, because they didn't, whiz kids from Carter were morons and didn't know what they were doing. The gun would blow up on them. If you do not have a strong enough breech in the gun, or barrel in the gun will essentially turn into a hand grenade. It's metal. So don't do that. Like modern day iteration with the most common rifle in the United States is the AR-15. I have an AR-15. Everybody does. I have several. All right, I have several guns that shoot 5.56, not 2.23. Now, here's the thing. Both those bullets in modern context are the same bullet. The 5.56 has higher pressure. If you buy a gun, barrel, chamber, like if you buy the top end of a cool looking AR-15, but it says 2.23 on it, that means the barrel, the breech, and all that stuff is only rated for 2.23 pressures. The pressure created when that round is discharged. The 5.56 is a higher pressure military style round. Not military. I hate military style. It's just a higher pressure round designed for more penetration and longer distance shooting. Here's how this works. If you bought a 2.23 barrel and you buy 5.56 ammo and you load a magazine of 30 in there, which is a standard magazine, there's high capacity is like 100, 200 rounds. How do I phrase this? It most likely won't explode with the first, 5.56 rounds you put in. However, the pressure is just high enough that where several guys have discussed this, where you'll boom, boom, boom. Oh, cool, man. Boom, 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 bang. Okay, cool. You had the pressure over pressure, and then you overfired it, and causing cracks in the frame, and then all the pressure does is find the weakest crack and explode. When you're dealing with calibers of bullets, be sure your gun is rated for the bullet. If it doesn't say Magnum, it's not Magnum. It's 2.23 and 5.56 are the most annoying things, but they are. You use, and I always say this again, know your weapon, know what it's capable of doing. The bullets are very important. Now, I'm going to go over, I'll discuss how a bullet is with calibers right here. Hunting, though, with the right caliber. Okay, I saw this online image. You can pick it up anywhere. It's probably free. Black bear, black deer, all this kind of stuff. The thing is what I want to show is the different sizes of these things. This is a 17 millimeter, by the way. Millimeter and caliber and gauge. Millimeter is European. They usually do. My bullet is a 9mm, one of the most common rounds used in the world. Stupidly, I hate the 9mm. It's a faster round, but it's 9mm across the bullet. From one edge of that bullet to the next edge of that bullet is 9mm. And then you have my own Parabellum, and there's a bunch of other ones in there. Then there's caliber. Now I said something like 50 caliber, 45 caliber, 44 caliber, 308 caliber, 223 caliber. Those are all calibers. Calibers are an American way of doing percentage of an inch. If you have a 223, it is 22.3% of an inch across the bullet. A 50 cal is half an inch across. It's a heavy ass bullet. 45% of an inch across. 44% of an inch across. That's the size or diameter of the bullet. Not the radius, the diameter. Yeah, diameter across. That's how those are measured. Millimeters and gauge. Gauge is a whole nother thing that nobody really figures out, but gauge, the lower the number, the bigger the bullet. Like an 18 gauge or a 410 gauge. 410 is actually small, but 12 gauge is big, and then you have like an 8 gauge. 8 gauges used to be these big shot. You use them for bird hunting. Essentially, you just had a really big bullet, a really big 12 gauge shell. And you, bird, and you fire it up, and it would hit the bird out of the air. You use 12 gauge for that. You use 12 gauge for home defense too. But gauge is the lower it goes, higher it is, and with gauge and shotgun rounds, you get all the bird shot and all that kind of stuff. I think I went over before. But I hope this gives you a primer on this kind of stuff and you look more into it. But like I said, be safe with your guns. Always practice the rules of gun safety. Always, and I do mean this, always be safe. Follow the rules of gun, like I said, and just in general have fun with it. That's what guns are. Guns are fun, but guns are also dangerous. For guys, these are a necessary thing. You want to protect your house, your family? It's the way to go, in my opinion. Now, like I've said, like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends, see them on. Leave your comments. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm an idiot. Tell me if you see things differently in the comment section. Also, I do know Chad the Man, and if you don't know what that is, okay. Y'all have a nice day. I'm going to get into some other stuff later, but bye.